North America now to Europe, and investigations are now underway into the massive power outage that brought Spain and Portugal to a grinding halt on Monday. Spain's High Court has launched a formal probe to determine whether the blackout may have been caused by a cyber attack. A Spanish court says it is probing possible sabotage. This comes even as Spain's national grid operator ruled out any cyber breach, instead blaming a grid disconnection with France. Portugal, however, pointed to a voltage surge originating in Spain. Here is what the Director of Operations, Eduardo Prieto, had to say.
En primer lugar, me gustaría anunciar la buena noticia de que el sistema eléctrico se encuentra en estos momentos funcionando de manera normalizada, funcionando de manera estable y correcta. Pero con los análisis que hemos podido realizar hasta este momento, podemos descartar un incidente de ciberseguridad en las instalaciones de...
Meanwhile, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said Spain lost 15 gigawatts of power in just 5 seconds. This is about 60% of the national power demand. He has spoken to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte as rumours of sabotage continue to swirl. Here is what the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has said.
Red Eléctrica ha hecho saber que descarta en la red de transportes cualquier ciberataque. Valoramos positivamente este aspecto, pero en todo caso la responsabilidad del Gobierno de España es hacer un análisis independiente de qué es lo que ha sucedido y, por tanto, también utilizar todos los mecanismos, los resortes que tiene la Administración General del Estado, el INCIBE, el Centro Criptológico Nacional, y una vez examinados esos registros de red eléctrica y de todos los operadores privados, pues no descartar ninguna hipótesis hasta que tengamos los resultados de estos análisis, que por supuesto, ya les adelanto, se harán públicos.
Well, following the power outages and the chaos that it caused, power has now returned, with 61% of Spain's electricity restored. In Portugal, 85 out of 89 substations are back online. Investigators are racing to uncover what triggered one of Europe's biggest blackouts in decades. Well, joining us to discuss this blackout and the potential cause is Marian Duris, a European affairs expert, who is joining us from Brussels. Marian, thank you very much for being here. Let's start with this probe that has been launched. Of course, a blackout of this scale, covering not just one country but two, is almost unheard of. So this probe, how seriously will it be taken, and how likely is it that it is sabotage, as has been potentially suggested by one court?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question and for having me. Yes, the probe will show us for sure more than we know right now. But I would like to say more background in this situation, because, for example, for Spanish government, it was a historic achievement that national grid was powered entirely by renewable energy, and it was not so long ago. It was on Tuesday, April 16. So wind, solar, and hydro met 100% of mainland electricity demand. But just 6 days later, on April 22, Spain and Portugal experienced one of their largest ever blackouts. The power cut also affected not only these two countries, but also parts of France, of Andorra, Belgium, and Netherlands, as the Iberian grid disconnected from the wider European network. According to some sources, very strong oscillation in the grid triggered this disconnection. Portugal's representatives blamed extreme temperature variations that disrupted high voltage power lines. So, while the cause is still under investigation, experts are raising concerns about grid stability in high renewable systems. At the time of the blackout, solar was generating, as you said, 60% of Spain's electricity. So what can be issue? Solar, wind rely on inverter-based technology, which lacks the rotating inertia of traditional coal, gas, or hydro plants. So these older systems act as shock absorbers during grid disturbances. Without them, grids become faster but more fragile. Still, So grid fragility remains a concern, especially as coal and nuclear plants continue to be phased out.
Yes, Marian, we have been showing on screen some of the impacts of these power outages, as you say, impacting mainly Spain and Portugal, but also it being felt elsewhere like France and Andorra as well. Given the disruption that this caused in the immediate term, what further impacts could this have? Almost ripple effects off the back of the travel disruption and other impacts to daily life.
Yeah, exactly. It had significant and widespread impacts across both countries. So, as we said, transport, public services, as we can see, traffic lights failed, leading to major congestion in urban areas. Emergency services were deployed to manage the situation, and the city of Madrid activated its emergency response plan. Another sector is healthcare. Hospitals switched to back up the generators to maintain critical operations. For example, telecommunications were severely affected. Government operations, key institutions including Spanish Parliament and the Madrid Stock Exchange experienced power outages, leading to the suspension of activities. And we can say about casualties, we can say about Lisbon Airport or another things like utilities, water supply services were affected. So I think this impact was absolutely monstrous and significant. What about impact on these countries? Yeah.
Yes, Marian, we have a couple of minutes left. I want to look at the response from the leaders of both Portugal and Spain. And also, I would like to touch on what might be done to future-proof any further outage like this one.
Yeah, both countries have initiated several measures to address the immediate crisis and prevent future occurrences. In case of Spain, crisis management, government activated the crisis cabinet at Red Electrica headquarters with Prime Minister and key ministers, of course. There is investigation, as we mentioned, case of accountability, and of course, they need some kind of public guidance, because during the critical hours of the blackout, there were some advices to citizens to minimize travel, rely solely on official information sources, and use mobile phones responsibly, etc. In case of Portugal, there was emergency meeting, government convened an emergency cabinet, same. Grid stabilization, the Portuguese electricity distributor implemented controlled power cuts in specific areas to stabilize the network. And of course, case of infrastructure resilience. So this means backup power systems were activated in critical facilities, including hospitals, airports, to maintain essential services during the outages. So I think there is need of these coordinated efforts, which are reflecting commitment to enhancing the resilience of the peninsula power infrastructure and preventing similar incidents in the future.
Marian Duris, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. That is all we have time for now, but make sure you're tuning in around